The automatic door slid open. A middle-aged man walked in, wearing a faded jacket, a cap pulled low over his eyes, hands in his pockets. No one knew he was Daniel Grayson, the CEO of the entire chain of stores. He stopped, his gaze slowly sweeping across the sales floor. The shelves were disorganized, customers moved quietly. There were no greetings, no laughter. The atmosphere was stiflingly strange. On the other side of the checkout counter, a female employee was scanning items. She looked to be in her 30s, her hair loosely tied, eyes swollen and red. She tried to smile at customers, but her hands trembled, and her voice was unsteady. Daniel hid behind a shelf, pretending to look at canned goods. He hadn't seen it wrong. She had just wiped away tears with her sleeve, right in the middle of her shift. And when he saw the manager storm out, speaking sharply, Daniel knew for sure. Something was very wrong here. Daniel Grayson stood silently in the aisle like an anonymous customer. But he was the very man who had designed the red and white logo hanging on the wall. The name Grayson's Market had once been the pride of his life. He used to believe that if you treated employees fairly, they would treat customers well. That philosophy had helped him expand to 18 branches and retain hundreds of staff members. But in recent months, something had changed. Customer complaints had risen unusually. Shelves were empty, employees irritable. Then an anonymous letter reached him, claiming that someone was being mistreated within his very own system. Regional managers dismissed it as a rumor, blaming a few lazy and complaining staff members. But Daniel didn't buy it. He knew, when many people start to feel injustice, something is definitely rotting from within. Daniel walked slowly past each aisle. He didn't need to pretend. The silence here made everyone invisible. Customers moved like ghosts. No questions, no small talk. Not a single employee greeted anyone. The dairy section was a mess. The bread shelf had only a few torn packages left. A promotional sign had fallen over and was leaning against a trash bin. No one bothered to put it back up. Daniel peeked into the produce section. An onion had rolled onto the floor, its skin dried out. He bent down to pick it up, but there was no one to return it to. At the old Grayson's Market, every morning the staff would line up to greet customers. Managers were required to check each area for scent, lighting, and order. But here, there was only the stale smell of old coffee, dingy floors, and tired eyes. Daniel clenched his fists in his coat pockets. What he saw wasn't just laziness. It was a team that had given up. "Kendra!" The sound tore through the air like a slap to the face. Daniel spun around. A tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a black vest embroidered with the word supervisor was striding out from the stockroom. His face was flushed red, and he slammed a clipboard hard onto the checkout counter. "Crying on shift again?" he growled. "How many times do I have to tell you? If you can't keep it together, then quit." Kendra froze. She swallowed hard and quickly wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I'm sorry. I'll be fine." "Fine?" Troy lowered his voice, glaring at her menacingly. "You've already taken 2 days off this month. Don't be surprised if your shift next week disappears entirely." Kendra gave a faint nod, her red-rimmed eyes cast down. No one defended her. No one dared step in. Daniel stood behind the shelf, his chest tightening. He knew this wasn't firm management. This was open intimidation, and he had never allowed that to happen in his company. After Troy retreated into the office, the air remained heavy, like a storm had just swept through the front lobby. Kendra tried to stand tall, took a breath, and resumed serving customers. She said, "Thank you," like a machine, but her voice trembled, and her hands still shook as she handed over receipts. Daniel didn't take his eyes off her. He pretended to rearrange a few canned goods, but his gaze stayed fixed on checkout lane 4. She didn't scream, didn't push back, just silently braced herself to keep from falling apart. As the crowd thinned, Kendra leaned lightly against the counter, clutching a fold of her uniform. Her lips pressed tightly together as if holding back another wave of tears. Daniel felt a sting in his chest. It was no longer anger, it was pain. What burden was this girl carrying that brought her to her knees in the middle of a shift, and yet she still forced herself to keep going as if nothing had happened? Daniel moved over to the snacks and candy section, pretending to search for something. But he noticed everything: the glances, the body language, even the unnatural silences that had no place in a retail store. A young male employee stubbed his toe on an unattended pallet. No one asked if he was okay. He quietly restocked the shelves, head down. An elderly customer stood waiting at the service counter for nearly 3 minutes. No one came. At the frozen goods section, a female employee stretched to attach a new price tag. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and her breathing was heavy, as if just holding herself up took effort. Daniel saw it clearly, a team operating as if they had lost all hope. No one said it aloud, but everyone was tired. Tired in their eyes, their posture, in the unconscious sighs that slipped out. This was no longer just an underperforming store. This was a place where people had stopped believing their work mattered. Daniel shivered. He understood now. The problem ran deeper than he'd thought. Daniel slowly walked to the housewares aisle, picking up a cheap aluminum pan. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying a meeting from just a few weeks ago. On the meeting table that day, amid stacks of colorful reports and sales charts, sat a plain brown envelope with no return address. Just a few hastily scrawled lines. "Someone in the store is being pushed to the edge. You should look into it before it's too late." The regional directors had scoffed. One said, "Probably some Gen Z kid sulking because they didn't get a raise." Another chimed in, "Employees whining is a weekly occurrence. If we paid attention to every complaint, nothing would ever get done." Daniel had stayed silent then, but the letter. He hadn't forgotten. The tone wasn't one of complaint, it was a cry for help. Now, seeing Kendra, seeing this entire team, he understood. The person who wrote that letter was telling the truth. And he was the only one left with enough authority to make it right. During break time, Daniel bought a granola bar from the vending machine and made his way toward the break room. He didn't intend to go in. He just wanted to see how the staff unwound after such a tense shift. But as he approached, he stopped in his tracks. Inside, there was the sound of quiet sobbing. Then a voice, hushed and broken between breaths. "I can't do this anymore." It was Kendra. "I tried. I really tried, but nothing's ever enough. They cut my hours. This week I can't even afford gas. My rent's late." Silence. Then another voice, softer, probably the young employee he'd seen earlier in the frozen goods section. "Troy's coming after me too. Anyone with kids or who gets sick or asks for time off, he punishes them." Kendra wept. "I didn't skip my shift because I was lazy. My son had an asthma attack. He was hospitalized. I begged Troy, but he said I wasn't trustworthy." Daniel stood frozen. Her voice was like a blade, slow and deep. Each word struck at his greatest fear, that the company he had built had become a place that crushed people's spirits. It was already dark when Kendra left the store. The lights from the Grayson's Market sign cast streaks across the stained concrete. Daniel followed quietly at a distance. He didn't want to startle her. He just wanted to better understand. The silence she always carried with her. Kendra walked slowly, clutching her worn-out bag, her shoulders trembling as if she were still holding back tears. She stopped beside an old sedan, its paint chipped, rear window patched with tape. She opened her wallet, flipping through its compartments. A utility bill, a small ID photo, a nail clipper. Then, she turned the wallet upside down and shook it. A few coins tumbled out and scattered. She stared at the small pile of change in her hand trembling. Then suddenly covered her face, collapsing into sobs in the middle of the empty parking lot. Daniel stood still, his shadow stretching long under the light. He had read cost reports, heard wage summaries, but never before had he seen an employee cry because she couldn't afford the gas to get home. Daniel still stood there, behind a tree in the parking lot. The night wind slipped through his thin coat, but he didn't feel cold, only heavy. In front of him, Kendra remained crouched beside her car. Her hands covered her face, shoulders trembling in waves. A mother, a worker, a human being, pushed to the brink inside the very system that bore his name. Daniel had once believed that going undercover was about verifying facts. But in this moment, he knew he no longer needed verification. He had seen, he had heard, he had felt. As Kendra quietly wiped her tears, opened her car door, and started the engine, its feeble rumble rising, followed by a faint mist of smoke, Daniel closed his eyes for a few seconds. I can't leave this place until I uncover the whole truth. Tomorrow, he would return as a part-time worker, but this time, not to find faults, but to protect those being drowned in silence. The next morning, Daniel arrived very early. Fresh uniform on, a temporary name tag stuck to his chest. Dan, probationary staff. No one paid attention. No one greeted him. He was assigned to restock shelves in the dry food section, next to a skinny young man with glasses and slightly messy brown hair. Welcome, newbie, the young man said without looking up. I'm Marcus. Don't ask why people don't talk much. It's just less trouble that way. Daniel gave a faint smile. This kid was sharp. While rearranging boxes of cereal, Daniel quietly asked, How long have you worked here? 2 years? But I've never felt the air this heavy like in the past few weeks. Marcus glanced around, then lowered his voice. Troy's been tightening shifts, swapping schedules harshly. Anyone with young kids, personal stuff, gets put on the non-priority list. But the ones who stay quiet get bonus hours. Daniel frowned. The shift policy was being turned into a weapon. This young man didn't say much, but each word pierced through the glossy paint of the system like a needle. And Kendra? Daniel asked quietly, pretending to adjust a box of noodles on the shelf. Marcus looked at him for a moment, then sighed. She's the hardest worker here, but after missing 2 shifts because of her kid's asthma, Troy started going after her. Daniel turned toward him. Asthma? Yeah. The boy had an attack at night, had to be hospitalized. Kendra gave advance notice, asked to switch shifts. No one agreed. She missed them anyway. Since then, she's been cut from almost the entire schedule. Marcus paused, holding a box of baking powder, gripping it slightly tighter. Now, she's down to just over 15 hours a week. Not enough to cover rent, let alone her kid's medication. Daniel's hand tightened around the cart handle. 15 hours. That figure had come across his desk. He had signed off on it, thinking it was just staffing efficiency at store number 7. Now he knew. That number was the lifeline of a family, and he had unknowingly allowed it to be sliced apart piece by the hands of a ruthless manager. At the end of the evening shift, Daniel found a way to approach the side office, the one that housed the store's internal computer system. As the night crew began their handover, he took advantage of a brief moment during the shift change to log into the system using a technical support account, an access level he had never used but had always kept for emergencies. The screen loaded the store's shift schedule for the past 3 months. He typed in Kendra Owens. The chart appeared week by week, day by day. First month, 32 hours, week. The next, 24 hours. Most recent, 15 hours. This week, 9 hours. He clicked over to Internal Notes. A line popped up. Unreliable. Not priority for scheduling. Daniel clenched his jaw. He tried searching for more names. Marcus, Linda, Jorge. 3 employees who had seemed unusually worn down. All of them showed the same pattern of reduced hours and the same note. But for the trusted staff, those close to Troy, their hours were steady, even slightly increased. There was no more room for doubt. Troy wasn't careless. He was deliberately turning the schedule into a weapon, bleeding the team dry to polish up the reports. That afternoon, Daniel walked toward the manager's office. He knocked 3 times, softly. Inside, the sound of paper tearing and faint country music leaked through the door. Come in. Troy looked up, tired eyes but still carrying that air of superiority. He didn't recognize Daniel, just saw another new hire. "What's the issue?" Daniel stepped in, voice calm and steady. "I heard a few people mention Kendra, that her shifts were cut. Is that true?" Troy scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "She's a walking problem. Always missing shifts, blaming it on her kid. I don't have time to babysit every sob story on the payroll." Daniel held back his anger. "But if her son was hospitalized and she requested time off in advance, then—" "This is a job, not a charity," Troy interrupted. "I need people I can count on, not someone who runs home every time their kid sneezes." His voice was hard, cold, devoid of empathy. "And listen," Troy lowered his tone. "This method, it gets me praise. Cut hours, trim pay/expenses. Corporate loves that." Daniel stood still. Before him was a man running operations through calculated cruelty, not for efficiency, but for personal gain. And Troy truly believed no one would ever find out. Daniel stepped out of Troy's office, both hands clenched tight in his coat pockets. His chest felt as if a block of searing stone had been placed on it, not from exhaustion, but from rage. That man, a person entrusted with leadership, was wielding power like an iron rod, striking down the most vulnerable. Cutting shifts to make reports look good, slashing hours for a single mother to keep the KPI clean, crushing human dignity, and being rewarded for it. Daniel stopped in the middle of the aisle, eyes fixed on the Grayson's Market sign hanging at the far end of the hall. His name. And now, it was being tied to a model of exploitation. He took a deep breath, then pulled out his phone. His voice was calm but resolute. "Janet, cancel all my meetings tomorrow." "But, sir, there's the quarterly strategy." "I know," Daniel cut her off, "but something more important needs my attention. Too many people are paying the price for my silence. I'm going to store number 7, not as the CEO, but as the man who needs to make things right." That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the window of a cheap hotel near the store, holding a cup of tea gone cold. The streetlight cast a pale yellow glow onto the wooden table where he had spread out hastily scribbled notes, shift hours, employee names, each sign of fatigue he'd witnessed. On the last page, one name was circled in red: Kendra Owens. Daniel closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw the early days of his career, when he was a young man behind the produce counter, hand-wrapping potatoes, scrubbing grease stains off the floor with his own 2 hands. Back then, he had sworn never to let his company become like the ones that had mistreated him. And yet, now... Grayson's Market hadn't just betrayed that founding promise, it was quietly crushing people like Kendra beneath its weight. Daniel unlocked his phone and scrolled through employee photos. Troy's face appeared. Forced smile, the suit praised by upper management. He swiped it away, then paused at an old team photo. Authentic smiles, people standing shoulder to shoulder with pride. "Enough," he whispered. "Tomorrow morning, I won't hide anymore." Early morning. The first rays of sunlight were still blurred on the glass doors of Grayson's Market when Daniel Grayson stepped inside. This time, no baseball cap, no worn-out coat, no act of being the new hire. He wore a crisp gray suit, a light blue tie, pinned to his chest a gleaming metal badge, CEO, Daniel Grayson. His steps were slow but deliberate. The air in the store seemed to shift, drop, like something had just changed, though no one could quite name it. A few employees looked up and froze. Some recognized him instantly, eyes widening, mouths whispering, "That's him. That's the owner." Kendra spotted him from across the floor, her hand paused mid-scan. Her eyes locked with his, and she knew. This was no longer the man who restocked shelves yesterday. Daniel walked straight toward the service counter, where Troy stood sipping coffee, muttering over the shift schedule. Troy hadn't looked up yet. Just a few more seconds. And then the game would be over. Troy had his head down, eyes on the clipboard, a spoon still in his mouth, stirring coffee absently. He didn't notice the strange stillness slowly rippling through the store around him. A shadow stopped in front of him. Shiny leather shoes. Not familiar. "Good morning," a man's voice rang out, deep, clear and sharp like a blade wrapped in velvet. Troy looked up, frowning. "Who are you?" Daniel calmly reached into his coat and pulled out a badge. Polished metal, the engraved letters catching the light. Daniel Grayson, Chief Executive Officer. Troy froze. The coffee in his hand trembled. His lips moved. "Wait, you—" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "I'm the one who heard everything, saw everything, and now I'd like a word with the manager of this store." Troy's face shifted, from confusion to fear in a blink. He looked around. Employees had stopped what they were doing, silently watching. No one smiled. No one came to his rescue. Daniel stepped forward. His voice dropped, but it hit like steel. "We need to talk about how you've been treating my people." Troy stepped back half a pace, but no excuse came fast enough to shield him. His face had gone pale. "Sir, there must be a misunderstanding. I was only trying to keep the store running. Cutting the hours of a mother with a sick child," Daniel said coldly. "Is that your idea of keeping it running?" The air in the store dropped a notch. Around them, employees stopped everything. Marcus looked up from the shelves. Kendra held her breath behind the counter. "You know which employees are barely getting by," Daniel went on, "and instead of helping them, you punish them." Troy tried a nervous smile. "I was just optimizing costs. The monthly budget comes down from—" "Enough," Daniel cut in. He took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to argue." He raised his hand, palm open, steady. "I came to take back the keys." Troy stood frozen. His eyes darted, hoping someone, anyone, would intervene. No one moved. Slowly, he pulled the keyring from his pocket and placed it into Daniel's hand. "You're making a mistake," he said through clenched teeth. "These people, they just want to be coddled. None of them want to actually work." Daniel looked him straight in the eye. "They have been working, just under a weight you've never had to carry." Right after Troy left the lobby, Daniel turned around. His eyes swept across every employee, faces still stunned, uncertain, even fearful. "I need to meet with all of you. 10 minutes from now, in the break room." No one objected. No one asked why. They simply put down what they were holding and followed his words. The break room had never been this full. Some stood, some sat, others leaned against walls, hands still dusted from stocking shelves. The air was thick, half hope, half hesitation. Daniel stood in front of them. No podium, no microphone. He began slowly. "I'm the founder of Grayson's Market, and I failed in the one thing that matters most, making sure you are treated with respect." The room went utterly still. A few eyes shimmered. Kendra stood in the corner, arms wrapped around her elbows. Daniel continued, his voice firm. "I've seen what's been happening here. I've heard it, and I believe you. Starting today, how we run this place is going to change, and that change begins with me asking one of you for help." He turned toward Kendra. "If you're willing, I'd like you to step up as assistant manager of this store." The break room felt frozen in time. Kendra stood motionless, eyes flicking around the room as if Daniel had mistaken her for someone else. She swallowed hard, fingers clutching the edge of her uniform. Me?" Her voice trembled, laced with disbelief. Daniel nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to be assistant manager, officially, with full authority and full trust." Soft murmurs stirred in the back. A few staff exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "It's really her?" Kendra shook her head slightly, her voice barely above a breath. I've been written up. They said I wasn't reliable. I cried in front of customers." Daniel gave a gentle smile. "And you still stood back up. You've worked through pressures no one should face. Yet you supported your teammates, stayed respectful to customers, and never gave up. The title I'm giving you today is just making official what you've already proven for a long time." Kendra bit her lip, eyes welling up, her whole body tense as if about to crumble, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "If you believe in me, I'll try." Daniel nodded, his voice warm and firm. Don't try, Kendra. You've already done it. Now, just keep going. The door to the manager's office clicked shut behind Kendra with a soft, "Cash." She stood still for a few seconds. Not from fear, but because she didn't know where to begin. The room still carried Troy's scent. Stale coffee, cheap cologne, and something else intangible, cold and oppressive. Kendra sat in the swivel chair at the center of the room. Her back touched the worn leather of the peeling backrest, one wheel creaking softly beneath her. In front of her was the office computer. She opened the shift schedule, and then her expression began to change. Line by line appeared, Linda, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 consecutive shifts. Jorge, 1 p.m. to 10 p.m., then back again at 7 a.m. the next day. Cassie, no assigned shifts. Note, frequent leave requests due to childcare. Kendra frowned and pulled up more records. The schedules were overwhelming. Back-to-back, misaligned hours, forcing people into time blocks where they couldn't care for their kids, couldn't study, couldn't live. It hadn't just been her. Troy had manipulated the entire system. Kendra sat in silence, heart pounding. Then she whispered, "He didn't just hurt me, dear T. He hurt the whole team." Kendra tore her eyes from the screen. She leaned back in the chair, took a deep breath, then straightened up again. On the desk lay Troy's old notebook, filled with red ink scribbles. Cut Linda's shifts, complains too much. Cassie equals troublesome. Jorge equals not eligible for prime hours. Kendra closed the notebook and pushed it aside. She opened a blank page in the scheduling software and started fresh. The first line she typed, "Prioritize single mothers. Assign consistent morning shifts." Then, "Limit consecutive night shifts to no more than 3 days." And, "If employees have classes, kids, or family duties, notify early and we'll adjust." She typed each line slowly, but firmly. Every click was a weld to a system that had once collapsed. Kendra knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be understaffed weeks, difficult customers. But if you wanted to keep good people, you had to begin by respecting the lives they lived outside their uniforms. At the bottom of the new schedule, she typed one final line in bold. "Any concerns about shifts? Come see me directly. My door is always open." She looked up through the office window. Staff moved across the floor. Midday sunlight streamed in, and, for the first time, she saw hope in this place. That afternoon, Kendra sent an internal message. 5 minutes before the last shift, staff meeting in the break room. No one knew what was coming, but everyone showed up. The break room felt different today. No Troy, no clipboard slamming, no scowls or narrowed eyes, just Kendra, standing at the front, hands still a little chalky from shelf work. She looked around the room. Many sat hunched, some stood with arms crossed, others just waited, quietly, cautiously. Kendra began, her voice still shaky but clear. "I know. These past weeks have been hell. I used to think that staying quiet was the only way to survive." She paused, swallowed. "But I was wrong, and I'm sorry, not just for staying silent, but for not standing with you sooner." At the back, Marcus lowered his gaze. Linda clenched her hands. Someone gave a small nod. Kendra took a breath. "Starting today, you all have the right to speak up. The schedule will match your realities. No one should have to choose between their job and their kids. And if I make mistakes, if I ever treat someone unfairly, you can come straight to me. Or if needed, straight to Mr. Grayson." A few heads lifted. Then a single clap echoed. Then another. Then the whole room. No cheering, no dramatic moment, just a collective exhale, the sound of people finally breathing after a storm that lasted far too long. The meeting ended, and people slowly filtered out. The tension had eased, but comfort hadn't quite taken its place. Not yet. Kendra lingered near the door, eyes scanning the flow of departing staff, looking for someone. She spotted Marcus pushing a supply crate toward the stockroom. Thin frame, shoulders slightly hunched beneath the weight he'd carried for far too long. "Marcus," she called gently. He paused, turned, a little surprised. "Yeah? Something wrong?" Kendra walked toward him. "You helped Linda train the new hire this afternoon, right?" Marcus scratched his head, smiling awkwardly. Kinda, but I'm not great with people's stuff." Kendra shook her head, smiling back. "Troy said you weren't fit to face customers, but he also said I wasn't worth trusting." Marcus froze. For the first time, he really looked at her. "I've seen how you talk to your coworkers. Calm, patient, genuine. That's exactly the kind of person I need out front." He blinked. "You mean, I want you on the floor, talking to customers. If you're willing, I'll train you myself starting tomorrow." It took a while before Marcus nodded, slowly, but it was the nod of someone who had once believed they'd never be picked. Only a few days had passed, but the atmosphere at Grayson's Market had already begun to shift. Not bustling, not a miracle. But warmer. An elderly woman stood puzzled by the frozen foods aisle, her cart idle. Marcus approached gently and asked, "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" The woman smiled, eyes surprised. "It's been a long time since a staff member asked me that." Across the store, Linda restocked the fruit display. For the first time in weeks, she hummed softly along with the store's background music. Kendra moved from aisle to aisle, not with her head down, not avoiding eye contact. She no longer came to work just to survive. She was rebuilding a culture. One young employee helped a customer push her cart to the parking lot. Another, unprompted, picked up a fallen promo board and set it back in place. Daniel, watching quietly from the far end of the store, took it all in. He didn't need to write anything down. Real change was always clearest in people's eyes and in the way their feet touched the ground. 1 week later, Daniel returned to store number 7. No announcement, no entourage. Just a man in a pale blue shirt, coat slung over his shoulder, stepping in at midday. He walked down the main aisle, the one that once held toppled shelves, tired stares, and silent resignation. Now, the floor gleamed. The shelves were full, and more than anything, the air felt different. Marcus was helping an elderly woman load bags into her cart. At Register 3, Linda was smiling, truly smiling, as she chatted with a returning customer for the first time in weeks. At Register 4, Kendra knelt down, handing a bear-shaped sticker to a fussy little girl. The child's mother offered a grateful smile. Daniel stood quietly at the back of the store. No one noticed him, or, if they did, no one made a fuss, and that was exactly what he wanted, because the best kind of leadership is the kind that can step away and leave the place better than before. He smiled. For the first time in months, it wasn't a forced one. Daniel walked toward checkout lane 4, where Kendra had just finished helping a young mother with arms full of grocery bags. She turned and blinked in surprise when she saw him. "I didn't think you'd stop by today." Daniel nodded, eyes soft. "I didn't think I'd get to see this place like this so soon." Kendra lowered her gaze, a bit shy. "I'm just trying to do the right thing. I'm not always sure. Some days I panic. Some days I almost gave up." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I know, but what matters is, you didn't." He stepped a little closer, voice lower. "I didn't give you this opportunity. You claimed it, every time you stood back up when life pushed you down." Kendra froze for a second. Her eyes were slightly red, her voice softer. "I used to think I was just a replaceable part." "No." Daniel shook his head gently. "You're the reason I believe this company is worth continuing." In that moment, amid the passing customers, there was no background music, no slogans. Just two people, shaped by different pressures, now standing side by side in understanding. Kendra closed the office door behind her, the evening sunlight filtering softly through the old plastic blinds. It was still Troy's old office, but now the air no longer smelled of pressure. She sat at the desk but didn't turn on the computer right away. Instead, she took a blank sheet of paper and taped it to the wall just above the monitor. The first line she wrote in bold strokes. Schedules exist to support, not to punish. Beneath that, she added, one line at a time. Listen first. Adjust later. Every hour worked is a piece of someone's life. Never let anyone cry out of fear of losing their job. Good people don't need control, just trust. She paused, took a deep breath, looked at the sheet, then at her own reflection in the locker mirror. Hair neatly tied, uniform crisp, eyes still a little tired, but no longer the same woman who once trembled at the checkout lane. Kendra smiled, softly but genuinely. No need for a fancy title, no need for recognition, just one quiet promise, that no one on her team would ever feel alone again. At day's end, the glass doors closed softly behind the last customer. Inside, the warm yellow lights slowly dimmed into rest mode. Kendra stood at checkout lane 4, the front line that had once tested every ounce of her strength. She looked around. Marcus was showing a new hire how to check inventory. Linda folded her uniform shirt, waving goodbye to her teammates. Daniel was no longer there, but she knew. He was watching from somewhere, like a father who had just passed the keys to the next generation. Kendra exhaled gently. She turned, flipped off the counter light, and stepped through the front doors. On the way home, she stopped by the gas station. This time, her wallet wasn't empty, and her hands didn't shake. She filled the tank, got back in the car, and looked at her son sleeping peacefully in the back seat. A quiet smile spread across her face, not because she had earned a title, but because she had refused to give up. A calm, steady voiceover echoed, low and warm. Sometimes, changing a whole system starts by listening to just one person. And sometimes the strongest one is the one who broke down mid-shift but still showed up the next morning. The screen faded to black. Then a final line appeared. If you saw yourself in this story, leave a single dot in the comments. We're listening.